Namaste and welcome today to Disha's Soul to Soul Gupshup exclusive episode. We are diving deep into a story that lives in the collective soul of India and the entire world, the Ramayana, but through a lens rarely explored. Dena Merriam's The Untold Story of Sita, which is also known as Seetayan, is not just a retelling, it's a spiritual remembrance. Through past life recall and inner awakening, she brings us Sita's voice, her silence, her strength, her sacred mission. Sita becomes more than a character. She becomes a guide for all of us in this age of awakening. Now, let us all welcome this divine woman behind the soul stirring work, spiritual visionary, peace leader, and author of The Untold Story of Sita, also called Seetayan, Dena Merriam, right here with us. Welcome, Dena, to this exclusive episode of Disha today. Welcome to Soul Gupshup with Disha exclusive episode.
Thank you, Shivani, for having me. It's always a great, really pleasure to speak about Sita.
Yes, I can actually feel it. Whenever I've met you, whenever I have interacted with you, it's always about the gravity of how it would have been that time. And I can just imagine of you experiencing all that time. Yeah.
We
So
can bring
I
the Treasure
can't.
Yuga into our world now. We can live in that consciousness now.
Exactly. Now we can only live in that consciousness. We can't actually be there. But actually, in these times, getting all that from you is, I can't wait to listen to more from you. Yeah. So I think let me just start on with directly on the topic without wasting more time. So, your book actually feels deeply personal, like it's a message from the soul. And what actually inspired you to write this untold story of Sita, which is Seetayan, as we say it and refer to, because we've always been used to listening to Ramayana. So the Seetayan was something which was really kindling my soul. And how did your own spiritual experiences of the past life memories shape the way you told Sita's story in her own voice? So I'm really, really eager to know all this.
I guess I should begin by saying I first read the Ramayana when I was in my 20s, and it had a profound effect on me, and an immediate link was made with Ram and Sita. But didn't become living presences in my life. I would chant to Ram. I loved doing the chants Ram Sita. But I have a guru, Yogananda, and that was the focus for many years. And then about 20 years after I started meditating, I began having very vivid past life recalls, which initially were quite destabilizing because I sort of got back into those lives and had a whole life recall. So it wasn't just glimpses, it was a whole life, and it was the previous one, then the previous one, then the previous one, going back several lives. But eventually, because I continued to meditate, I was able to stabilize and learn to be in multiple time periods at the same time.
Yeah,
And
I can
over the
imagine.
years, it became something that was sort of natural to me. And about 10 years ago, through my work at the Global Peace Initiative, I organized a conference in Kashi,
Yeah. Oh,
Varanasi, on Dharma. How do we understand Dharma in the world today?
right.
And I had about, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 people from mostly the Buddhist and Hindu traditions. And afterwards, some of my friends said, let's take a train to Ayodhya. And so we did. We took a train to Ayodhya. At that time, it was still very much a contested area.
This
And
is
there were
in
check.
2000, 2000, year 2000.
It's about 10 years ago. So it was
Okay.
like, so maybe 12 years ago. It
Okay.
was, there were checkpoints all over, and to get to the site where I believe the temple is now, you had to, I've been to Kashmir many times, and it was the same kind of experience. You leave everything, you can only, quickly walk by, you can't really meditate there. But as soon as I stepped off the train, entered another reality, and it was the reality of Sita. So it stirred something. Often my past life recalls happen if I go to a place or I meet a person. There's some trigger that sets
Yeah.
me off.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was very, very inwardly moved by the experience. I wasn't seeing the external. I was really having an internal experience of going back into old Ayodhya. And then sometime later, a few months later, I was doing work in Kashmir, and I went to Jammu and went to the Vaishnava Devi temple, uh, uh,
Talking about
and
Kashmir now in these times is really
I was there the day before it erupted.
Oh.
And then there's a Raghunath temple in Jammu, which is not very much visited, but very powerful. And after the Vaishnava Devi temple, I went to the Raghunath temple, and there I had a very powerful past life recall.
Raghunath Temple.
Yeah, Raghunath
Okay.
temple in Jammu.
Okay.
Very powerful. And there was nobody there when we went. And again, maybe this is about 10 years ago. I don't have the exact dates. I came back and I started writing the untold story of Sita.
Mm.
And while I was writing it, I was really living in a different time period. I was in the presence of Sita. Uh,
Yes.
uh, and my only hope was that my readers would have that same experience. They would feel Sita not as only an historical figure, not as a legendary personality, but as a living presence who they can interact with. And
Yes.
since that time, it's as if Sita never left. She is a living presence for me, and Ram as well, because I see them as inseparable. So I'm just finishing another book. I didn't expect, after writing the Untold Story of Sita, I didn't expect to write about Sita anymore, and I went on to write a book about Rukmini, and then two other books. Uh, then I was in India, I guess about 15 months ago, for some events around the Sita book. And I came back and I had a dream of Sita, which I talk about in my new book, which is Sita's Yoga, the Yoga of Awakening. And it goes into greater depth on how Sita guided. It's the teachings that Sita gave to the villagers who would come and seek her out
Mm.
after she retreated to the forest when she
Mm.
returned from Lanka. And there are many stories about Sita in there, as seen through different people's eyes, different people who had the experience of her. And
Mm.
so it goes more deeply
Mm.
into the teachings. The first book, The Untold Story of Sita, describes the events around Sita's life
Mm.
from the perspective of really a spiritual perspective, not just, oh, there was a war, but what was that war about?
Yeah.
And what was Sita, how was she contributing to that whole phenomenon? The war, we know a lot about the Mahabharata war, that it's really an internal battle,
Mm.
an internal battle that eternally exists. We're all engaged in that. Well, the war in Lanka was the same thing. And so in writing this new book, I was able to go into much deeper into what was really that war about, and how is it an ongoing battle that we ourselves are engaged in today? Because we see Ravana-like figures in the world.
Yeah.
They haven't gone away.
Yeah.
They keep popping up.
Yes.
How are we to deal with that? And what are the teachings of Ram and Sita? How do those teachings help us deal with those
Yeah.
Ravana figures of today?
Very important because that is what I think we know how to apply it in our daily lives today. Because even when I was reading Seetayan, it took me a while to read it, to absorb it. And I generally read books very fast, but this one I really took time to read each and everything. And actually while I was reading, I was actually seeing you the way you've written it, no, trying to experience even the how at the beginning there's one small tale about how she vanished from the tent from the forest just because she felt that there is some animal injured, and then she just vanished and she came back. And my god, that was so shamanic.
Yeah,
So,
those were more out in the open during Treta Yuga than perhaps today. Those kinds of experiences.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, going on to the next thing that I felt I should put up here was you portray Sita not just as a queen, but as a divine force, which is much bigger. It's like a mission. So, what do you feel was her true purpose on earth? Why was the birth, and why was it important to show her, beyond the traditional image that we've always known and we've grown up having the traditional image of Sita? But there's much, much, a lot of things beyond that.
Now, I think for many people, Ram is the king who established a dharmic civilization.
Mm.
But that place that confines him to a specific place and time. I see both Ram and Sita as having a cosmic role.
Yeah.
Who are they? Narayan and Narayani. They're Narayan and Narayani
Yes.
who have taken a human body on Earth to help Earth at a certain time. But
Yeah.
while they were doing that, they may have had 100 bodies in other places doing other
True.
things
Yeah.
because our true nature is omnipresence. And these divine beings are omnipresent. Our
Yes.
mind doesn't yet, it hasn't yet, for most of us, expanded to experience that. But
Absolutely.
the specific I think there were many, many reasons for the incarnation of Ram and Sita. One of them was it was a declining Treta Yuga, which means there was a loss of spiritual knowledge and a deeper embedding in the material. So,
Yeah.
Treta Yuga is approximately 6,500 BCE to 3,000 BCE.
Mm.
3,000
Yes.
BCE begins Dwapara Yuga. And that's when writing began. There was no writing before that because it wasn't
Mm.
needed. Between telepathy and memory, there was no need for writing. So while historians today look at that as progress, it was actually a decline in mental abilities. And
Yeah.
so during the declining yugas, we see a gradual decline in mental abilities. In Sata Yuga, you could perceive the deities.
Yeah.
You understood spirit being everywhere, everything conscious,
Yes.
everything
Yes.
alive.
Yes.
Treta Yuga was a bit of a decline from that,
Decline.
but
Yeah.
there was
True.
still amazing capacity. Dwapara there's a further decline.
Further
And
decline.
so
True.
as we're descending, and that's when you have the flourishing of the material realm with cities and trade and all of that we until what we have today. But
Yeah.
in the process, you have the degrading of the earth, etc. And
True.
so to embed into the human consciousness the memory of the divine, the
Mm.
memory of our true nature, as humanity was embarking on this decline, I think that was one of the purposes. And also to
Absolutely.
embed the understanding of Dharma how to have a life aligned with dharma. In my new book, there's a lot about karma. How I mean, when we have a life aligned with dharma, we're not increasing negative karma. Now, in other words, we're
Exactly.
not creating a negative future for ourselves. So it has both personal implications and collective implications, because as we live a dharmic life, we're adding to the collective positive energy.
True.
As we deviate from dharma, we're adding to the collective negative energy. And so we are all contributing to the world we have.
Yes. Actually, today is, I think, the right time that we have connected because right now it's really a dharma yudh, a dharma war happening all around right now.
Yeah,
And this is really the time, whatever dharma you belong to, you just need to adhere to the truthness and the core of the dharma. Only then we can move upwards again, the way we've descended down, way we can ascend up in this transitional period. And
exactly. And that's the purpose of the second book is what does that really mean in terms of how we conduct our life? I mean, it's got to be more than words. It's got to have concrete application to
yes.
how we live and how we think. I mean, the first thing is how we think because our actions follow our thought patterns. So there's a lot of significance, and that's why I have felt for some time now that Ram and Sita are very active in the world, not just in my personal life, which I feel their presence often, if not continually, but in the world at large. Uh,
Yes.
they are working. I was thinking the other day that during World War II, there were many enlightened. There were I wouldn't say many. There were enlightened leaders on the planet My own
Yes.
Guru Yogananda, Sri Aurobindo,
Yes.
Ramana Maharshi, and Moima, and
Yes.
yet they didn't intervene externally to stop World War II, which was creating so much suffering, and which were about 10 years. But what were they doing internally to help work through the karma? In other words, we're not spared the karmic rebound from our actions, but
Yes.
it can be hastened or softened. And I think that's as we see the world kind of spiraling into a lot of negative energies between the wars and the environmental degradation, it's easy to think we're not getting any help. You know, people say, where are the divine forces? But we can't see all that they're doing to prevent total collapse.
Yeah, actually, because whatever chaos is going on right now on the earth, or that time, whenever the wars happened, I think that was the karmic cycle, and that wash away was necessary that time.
It's like now. I mean, there's certain karma that's leading to certain outcomes. And until we can take stock of it and say, okay, what are the causes that have led to these conditions? How are we to change our behavior, really? This is both on a personal level and a collective level.
On a personal level, when we start changing, we definitely contribute to the collective level. Yeah. But anything else that you personally feel, because you were so close to Sita, that she was there that time? Anything says more to do with a revolution that came up that time, or something like that, that's more specifically that she wanted to be in those times.
You know, when a great one incarnates, many souls that are at a certain level in their spiritual evolution seek to incarnate at the same time
Mm,
to help the work,
mm,
to help stabilize the work, because it's a
mm.
collective effort.
Yes.
But also because they can achieve moksha during that time. And so there were such souls who incarnated during the time of Ram and Sita, who achieved moksha when they were on earth
Mm.
because of their presence.
Their presence. Yeah.
And so there are so many reasons for their incarnate why they incarnated at the time
Mm.
of a declining Treta Yuga when there was a loss of spiritual knowledge to help embed
Yes.
that spiritual knowledge to counter the negative thought patterns that Ravana and his allies were
Mm.
inserted into the collective.
Mm.
You know, for example, there were things that were unknown before that time,
Mm.
like amassing of material wealth. That didn't exist until
Yeah.
Ravana. I mean, you
Yes.
see, Matilda was a very modest. Janak Baba was the epitome of modesty and
Mm.
humility, and
Mm.
he didn't accumulate wealth. And even Ayodhya, which was a larger and wealthier kingdom, can't compare to what Lanka had. Lanka was the supreme example of
Mm.
greed, of
Ah.
accumulation of this, and which Sita and Ram saw was
Mm.
it was a bottleneck. You know, greed is like a dam; it prevents the flow of energy,
Yes.
and he was inserting that into the
Mm.
collective, that
Mm.
desire for more, for accumulation. And so, as well as other uh, uh, um, harmful characteristics. So,
Mm.
once these characteristics get inserted into the collective, more and more people start acting on that.
Yeah.
We're so influenced by the collective. So they had to go to the source, which was coming from Lanka, to sort of like stamp out those negative traits that were beginning
Mm.
to infiltrate into the collective.
Yes. Yeah.
Still have to
And
do
what?
that. We still have to do that.
A lot. We have to still do a lot. So, coming back to Sita's, her image is a lot misunderstood. Her silence, her calmness is often misunderstood as her weakness. But your book actually shows them as powerful spiritual choices that she made. So, what can we learn from her inner strength, and how does that actually connect to the idea of living in Dharma today?
Sita was a very powerful personality, and I think that as the traditional narrative came down to us, don't forget it took place. well before writing and passed through numerous articulations through a Kali Yuga period, a paternalistic period, which didn't exist at that time. And so Sita got shaped into a more quiet victim, which she was anything but. She was the shaper of the story. And had she not gone into Lanka, Ram
Things
could
will
not have
happen.
done what he did. So
Yeah.
it was by her choice, knowing that she would make the sacrifice so that they could accomplish what they needed to accomplish. And while she was in Lanka, as she sat in meditation, she was working on Ravana's mind,
Mhm.
entering his dreams and working on his mind, doing the internal work, which is often the work of Shakti, which
My
works
God.
on an invisible.
My God. This is what I have probably wanted to hear, because all this is not said on, even if it is said and experienced, it is not accepted in today's time. So this was powerful what you said right now. Yeah.
Work of Shakti, and she was a full partner to Ram in enabling the defeat of those negative energies, and she was an essential part of it. And then when she returns, I mean, there's so many things that are misunderstood. So the story that Ram makes her go through a fire of purification, nonsense.
Ah,
When he saw her, it was the fire of her sadhana, the fire of her energy, and she was burning up the impurities of
wow.
that place. And Ram saw that, and he was in awe when he saw what she was doing. Then they return, and there's this ancient curse, which I talk about in the book, which calls for their separation,
Yeah.
which turned out to be a great blessing. It's a long story. I won't go into it now. It's in the book, but it turns out to be a blessing because she had opportunities while living among the villagers that she would not have had she been in a
Staying in
palace.
the, yeah, staying with
Staying
Ram.
in the in
Okay.
the in the forest, in terms of nurturing the forest life, she had such love for all that lives, for the
Yes.
vegetation, for everything,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and it was a mutuality. Things flourished when she was around. There was when she was a child, walking through the forest in Mattila, her attendant someone says, Don't you see how the flowers just pop up when she passes by? I mean, they responded to her love and energy, and the villagers benefited from her being there. So even though it was a curse, it turned into a blessing, and it sort of signified the end of the period of cursing, where these sages had this power, uh, often influenced by their own emotions, and the beginning of a sort of neutral justice system, which is what Ram put in place.
Yeah. My God. When you started talking about the way she lived and all, I actually started imagining and feeling the presence. What do you think are the lessons of Sita for modern life? Like, what are some of the most important things from her life about love, about letting go, about inner power, about surrender, that, you feel people today, especially the younger generation, really need to hear about?
Well, it's not, I think, it's sort of clear that we're in a transition point, that we cannot continue on the path that we are without destroying the very ecosystems that support life. So a change in thinking is needed, and a change in behavior comes from a change in thinking. You start with the thinking. So, what is the thinking? I mean, one of the issues that we all have to deal with is the issue of greed. And greed is not just about material things. It's about and what is the way to counter greed? I mean, we see greed in the world. It's clear when you have people who have an amount of wealth that's more than some states, more than some countries. I mean, how much wealth is one day? I remember recently I read a statement by one of the heirs of the Walt Disney fortune, and she said, for $999 million, you should be able to accomplish all your desires, to do whatever you want in life. There's no need for more than that. Than $999 million. Well, that's we need to reflect on that. I mean, how do we have people that have accumulated so much and then people who can't eat? And so, what's the way to counter greed? Generosity. generosity is the word. The more generosity we have in our societies, the less greed there'll be. And so there are a lot of things like that, and that has direct impact on the environment, the amount of stuff that we have, and how we can begin to get joy. It's like rather than focusing on external development, which is what happened during the last few millennia, to focus on inner development, more love, more care, more community, more interactions with other people, more service. So the more we develop those qualities that are sattvic qualities in ourselves, eventually this will be reflected in our society. And so I think that it's a matter of just coming back to the more kindness. How do we counter fear by more trust? I mean, you look at all the negatives. How do we counter anger? By deeper compassion. So when you look at the negative qualities that are holding us, really binding us, and this is what the book addresses specifically, is if you take the opposite and cultivate that more in your life, then you're helping to create more light, and there'll come a point when the light overcomes the shadow.
I feel, anything that you want to, whether it is generosity, kindness, or combating, negatives, or whatever you are trying to do for yourself, for the society, it's entirely sums up to what intention you have from inside.
Attention is critical.
Yes.
You
That
know,
intention is something which will actually decide the degree or the depth of transition.
exactly. The attention is, I mean, even if you can't achieve what you want, if your intention is there,
I think the
there's sort of
beings which are there in the aura of the earth, if the intention is good, they will choose you and pick you up and they will push you up, in this phase of transition. Am I right?
exactly right. And so people often ask me about the environment. What can we do? I say, pick a tree and develop a close relationship with that being.
Sure.
That you acknowledge the being and you observe it and you spend time with it and you express love toward it, appreciation, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a tree, it can be a boulder, it can be anything. But
Yes, true.
form a personal relationship.
Yes,
And that
yes.
makes a difference. And then it becomes very personal.
That's what Sita did when she actually left the entire Ram Rajya and she started living in the forests with the villagers and all. I think that is what was the bond that she created with the common people. And her kids were born there. I think it was the big process of, how grounded she was, and how connected and how deep she was. And I think that is the quality that we all need to inculcate right now. Uh,
One
a
of
big
the things
quality.
the Avatar does, and Ram and Sita, this was certainly how they functioned on Earth,
Hmm.
is to help those really seeking
Hmm.
to work through their karma. In
True.
other words, how to live without incurring negative karma, how
Hmm.
to repay debts.
Yes.
And I show that a little bit in the Untold Story of Sita, but I go into more depth in this new book because I
Hmm.
see that in my life. I
Hmm.
have so many examples of how the present, sometimes it's Ram, sometimes it's Sita, sometimes it's my guru, uh, opens my eyes to karmic situation, and I realize that if I
Hmm.
if I go this way, I'm not resolving it. If I go that way, I'm resolving it.
Yeah. Yes.
But normally if you live unconsciously, you just sort of act on impulse without
Hmm.
seeing the choice before you. I can reinforce that negative relationship with that person, or I cannot reinforce it and resolve it.
Presence of Guru is so important in life, right?
Oh my goodness, how one lives without it, I don't know.
Very important.